Thank you very much for joining us to our second edition of ConnecTALKS Africa, Spotlight on Luxury Travel. It's really great to see so many of you logged on, and I can see both old and new friends. So for those of you who are joining us on this Connect Talk for the first time, welcome to Connections, the international private community for trusted decision makers in high-end travel. We help industry leaders from all corners of the globe meet, do business through memorable experiences that lead to long-lasting business relationships. Across our online community and calendar of events, Connections offer a year-round program that promotes brands, networking, learning, and recognition. So everything that we do is highly targeted, time efficient, meaningful, stimulating, and most importantly, fun. So we believe we are the next generation of doing business. As some of you know, we built our online community recently in the midst of this pandemic. And that was done in an effort to play our part in supporting the travel industry on the roadmap to recovery and resurgence. So across our network, we wanted to bring together trusted decision makers to connect, share, learn, collaborate with each other. And as part of our online program, we have been running a series of Connect Talks. In fact, today marks our 33rd session, with each session touching on a different topic pertinent to our community. So following our first Connect Talks Africa panel in June, we received requests to host another session to continue the conversation around the progress and the future of luxury travel and adventure in Africa. Therefore, I'm delighted today to be joined by Katie Dalrymple-Hamilton of Atta, and to welcome back Siobhan Byrne-Learat of Adams & Butler, Luke Brown of Vayeni, and Shaun Mousley of Nomadic Africa. So thank you all to our distinguished panelists for spending the time with us today. And before we begin, I wanted to briefly share a little bit about them. So I'm going to start with Katie. Katie is the project consultant of Atta, the African Travel and Tourism Association, a partner to the industry promoting quality tourism to Africa. Katie has spent 12 years working in various areas of the luxury African tourism industry, from working in Zambia for a safari operation to leading sales and marketing company with a portfolio of luxury and experiential properties across Southern, Central and East Africa. Most recently, she joined a UK tour operator for 2 years before joining Atta. She's traveled extensively and understands exactly what it takes to meet the demand of travelers to Africa from a variety of perspectives. So welcome, Katie. Siobhan is the president of Adams & Butler, who offer privileged access to private places coupled with unusual services and accommodation in luxury for vacation, family celebration, weddings, honeymoon, and also incentives. Although she is particularly knowledgeable about Ireland, Britain and Africa, Siobhan has recently set up a worldwide private luxury travel label for our discerning globe-trotting clients. They were recently voted Best Travel Advisor Professional at the Irish Travel Trade Award 2020. So congratulations, Siobhan, and welcome. Luke Brown is the co-owner at Vayeni Expert of Extraordinary Safari Journeys in Africa. Together with his wife, Suzanne, they set out to create a truly extraordinary safari company in Africa. Extremely proud of his roots in Zimbabwe, a country which he deeply believes is vastly rich and beautiful, whose people and wildlife are inextricably bound with its source and soulful energy. They truly live by their intention of creating escapes for the soul, something that they adhere to with immense passion. So welcome, Luke. Shaun Mousley is the owner and director of Nomadic Africa, who specializes in creating the ultimate travel itineraries throughout Africa, each one tailor-made to suit their clients. They are proudly partnered with the original Karen Downey Safaris through whom they offer luxury mobile tented safaris. From studying hotel management and working several years in the industry, Shaun has gained experience in all areas, from the management side to the marketing and private guiding. Shaun is also a photographer who has taught photography and guided along the way. And last but not least, we're joined today by Jeremy Clayton, who is the CEO of the general broking side of JW Seagon Group, a healthcare and general broking firm with its roots in Kenya, since way back actually in 1958. His insurance career started in 1980, and he's now in his 40th year, and he ran his own top 50 independent brokerage in the UK for 25 years until his sale and his retirement. Life as a retiree was not all that Jeremy expected it to be, so he ended up in East Africa, playing his trade in the region. So we welcome to all of our panelists. We hope that this will be a thoughtful session for you all, and everyone will gain new insights and perspective for your business. Thank you very much for joining us and joining the panel. But before we start, I'd like to let you know how it all works and what to expect. So for the next 45 minutes, I'll ask panelists a series of questions. And at the end, you'll also not only have your chance to ask your questions, but you also can join a social together where you can continue the discussion and talk about the subject, or just have an informal social over a glass of wine if time permits, or a cup of coffee if your time zone is not as late as in the UK. I'm sure many of you will have used Zoom before, but if not, I encourage everyone to have your camera on, as it helps to promote interaction and it makes it just a little bit more fun. I also ask everyone to place themselves on mute and to ask questions at any time, or make any comments or share any experiences through the chat button, which appears at the bottom of your screen. If you hover over with your mouse, you will see the chat box there. If you choose to use the chat button, you'll have the choice to share questions and comments with just the host, myself, or share questions and comments to everyone. That is entirely up to you. I suggest you field questions to me or my team, as the panelists might not see your questions as they're engaged on speaking. As part of the team, we've got Gemma Fitchett, we've got Greg Reeves, and then we've got Sadia as well, who are all there at hand. If you want to direct to them any questions, maybe privately, but please feel free to ask and comment as much as you wish. This session, as I said, will last 45 minutes, but it will be recorded. So if you know of any colleagues or friends who might also find this session useful, you can also distribute that to them. So I hope many of you will stay and enjoy the social afterwards altogether. And finally, can I ask you all to please be respectful and understanding of one another? We encourage you to have a positive and supportive spirit in these challenging times. Between us all, there is so much wealth of knowledge, insights, and advice that we can share and help guide one another through these uncertain times. So let's use this to the best of our advantage and for the good of our industry. So thank you, everyone. So let's begin. So I'm going to start with you, Katie. Please, can you begin by sharing a little bit of an update about the current situation across Africa? So in June, the continent was pretty much closed for business, with the exception of Tanzania and Rwanda. Has there been much change since then?
Micaela, thank you. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be involved here today. Thanks. And it's been an interesting few months. Back in June, when things were very much closed down and people were still feeling their way in the dark, there was Rwanda and Tanzania that was still allowing people in. But since then, things have moved on. They're pretty fluid, I'd say. They're changing almost on a daily basis. I've seen a few Atta members pop into this, and they'll see that we're kind of giving literally daily updates on what's allowed and what's not. But there's been some really good positive steps forward with borders reopening. So we're now sitting with Kenya being reopened, obviously Tanzania, Rwanda, Ethiopia's open, Seychelles, Zambia, but a lot of these countries, although are open, they do have, some of them do have prerequisites. So the likes of Seychelles, for instance, are saying only people from low and medium risk countries. And you can go online to their websites, the Seychelles Tourism Board website, and outline whether you, in the country that you're sitting in, fit into that area or not. So yes, there has been lots of good change, but it is slow steps. And I know that a lot of people have been looking at Namibia recently, and they were kind of one step forward and then a few steps back. So that's been moving a bit. And then only the other day, they've now said actually they're going to be opening on the 1st of September. So it really does require people to be quite flexible in their thought patterns when they're looking at the reopenings of borders. But for those countries that have reopened, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, they're continuing to go. Tourism has started. People are coming through, and into the Seychelles as well. Zambia's a bit newer. Local travel in the likes of South Africa has restarted again in terms of leisure rather than just business travel. So it is really good to see this, but they are taking it very, very seriously, and they are really trying not to reopen to then have to close again. So yes, change has happened, it is good, but there's still a bit of a way to go, I think.
Yeah, I think that this is not the only country that actually is being very cautious, because the last thing you want to do is open something to then reclose it again. So there is a lot of caution across a lot of countries. So good to hear that Africa is also one of them. Thank you very much for that. Luke, how are luxury travel businesses in Africa responding to this? What is your recovery strategy? Is Luke on the call? Yeah.
Hi, Micaela. Sorry, I seem to be having a couple of issues here, but I hope you can hear me okay. Yes, in some African countries where income per capita is higher, the luxury travel market has been able to tap into local bookings, albeit at a heavily reduced pricing that sits just above break even. Many luxury camps and lodges have made a conscious decision or opted to fully close until the start of the second quarter in 2021. But on the other hand, some have opened to capitalize on the local market and ensure staff morale and maintenance is kept up. In some cases, they only open for certain holiday periods and then close down again once those are done. But it's tricky because whilst things have opened up, as Katie mentioned, there remains some confusion surrounding quarantine restrictions on arrival, both when you arrive and also when you return to a home country, the travel and medical insurance parameters, and then the perception of Africa still being fairly early on in the COVID upswing. And so there are grey areas around that, as well as around possible medical facilities should you become ill whilst you're traveling. But in Southern Africa, where we are based, a lot of this confusion remains ongoing, although we're starting to get a little bit more clarity. But this gets tempered, of course, by the rules that happen in the marketplace. So, for example, UK safe destination list seems to change quite regularly. So, yeah, it's a fluid situation, and like Katie said, one just needs to keep very up to date with what's happening. But it is tricky for people looking to book, especially in the short term. And we'll talk more about that later, I'm sure.
Thank you, Luke. Now, of course, insurance, which you mentioned just a second ago, insurance plays an even larger role now when it comes to travelers feeling safe and protected in the current climate. Now, before we talk about this in more detail, I wanted to first touch upon the insurance from a travel business perspective, and we've got Jeremy here with us. So Jeremy, you have previously provided advice to businesses in different regions about how to save money on business insurance throughout the COVID crisis. Are there any things now to watch out for?
Indeed. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for inviting me, Micaela, to this session. So as we introduced, I've been doing this job for quite many years now, and when COVID-19 hit us, which the word is overused now, but unprecedented times, we decided to be proactive and talk to our clients in the tourism sector, whether they were hotels, camps, lodges, or tour operators and travel agents, with a view to how they could reduce their insurance premiums during these very, very tough times. So things to watch out for now is you need to keep on top of your insurances, whether you are any of the aforementioned organisations. So things like guests, public liability insurance, when people come to visit or you're sending people to different camps and lodges. A lot of the camps reduced their liability limits to very, very low levels because they weren't having any guests. And if they don't have any guests, there's no risks. Well, if you're now receiving guests or sending guests, then the risk is back again. So they can be injured or become ill. And so there's more need to consider your limits. So whoever your broker or insurer is, you should be talking to them about limits. Additionally, some of the camps and lodges, hotels, etc., were saying we're only taking local residents. As a result of that, they didn't feel the need to have what's called a worldwide jurisdiction clause, because any court case would be in the country of the camp, lodge, or hotel. So they've reduced their jurisdiction to local levels. That needs to be reconsidered as well. A lot of insurance premiums are based on turnover and wage roll, and a lot of people had minimal turnover and reducing their wage roll. Well, you may need to consider to increase it again now and notify your insurer or your broker of your anticipated fees, anticipated income, anticipated wage roll. And this could result in extra premiums, or your insurer may say we'll deal with it at next renewal date. A couple of other points. One of the issues that we have seen, of one of the ways to save money, is a lot of the companies are reducing their vehicle insurance to either what's called laid up cover or very minimal cover, on the basis that they weren't carrying passengers, whether they're transferring from hotels to lodges, camps, hotels. Well, it's probably now time, if you are receiving guests, to consider increasing the cover back to the limits that were there. Your insurer or your broker, your advisors, will be able to give you all the advice that you will need on this, but it is something to consider now. And what we're recommending to our clients is keep in touch with us regularly. So we're looking at doing monthly or quarterly meetings at the moment, because things are changing. As Luke mentioned earlier, things are changing on a daily, weekly basis. So who knows what's around the corner, but if the market comes back all of a sudden, then you need to be prepared. So my advice is to whilst insurance is a necessary, perceived as the devil, I'm sure, it's probably worth considering making sure that you have everything up to date and regularly be in touch with your insurance advisor.
Oh, very useful. Thank you very much about this, because, you know, especially when it comes to saving money or trying to look at things in a different way, it's certainly a world that is changing at a very fast pace. So knowing every penny that you can save, I think it counts. So I'm sure everyone is grateful about this. Siobhan, you mentioned that Adams and Butler were concentrating on places like Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, South Africa and Rwanda, which are all great for social distancing and spatial distancing. So from an agent's perspective, how are international clients feeling about the prospect of traveling to Africa?
Well, what we found, about 80% of our clients are from the US. And what we just found at the beginning of COVID, and like when we were talking in June, we still had American clients who wanted to travel, and they were very interested. They were all excited. They were sort of like pepped up, and they're ready to book as soon as all the restrictions were lifted. But since then, because of the political situation in the US, because of the economy, because of everything, there isn't, like, they still want to travel to Africa, but the problem is they feel very down. And you have to sort of reassure the clients, and you have to almost give them a pep talk and keep them interested. Like the figures released from Tanzania, for example, since July, they said that 30,000 tourists visited Tanzania. but we're not seeing that from a point of view of our clients booking yet. They are still talking, they're talking about next year. We're saying confidently we can book, say, from February onwards in South Africa. We're pushing Rwanda, Tanzania now, Kenya obviously, but also Zambia, since it's opened up as well, and then maybe in Malawi from the 1st September. From the point of view of Irish people traveling, they're more interested. They haven't changed their plans. They still, we've given them itineraries and they're ready to book, I'd say, within the next few months. But we thought we'd have a lot more bookings at this time, and they haven't materialized, but the inquiries are all still live. But we do find that element of frustration and just exuberance is gone from the American clientele for the moment. And also, like, a lot of demanding things, like, an inquiry came in today and it's for next week, and they wanted the property that they're going to have their staff tested twice before they arrive. Like, that's impossible. First of all, you have to find a property, and then you have the property to agree to get their staff tested. So we're getting a lot of unreasonable demands as well that are coming in, and I don't think people fully understand the situation.
And confidence is definitely something that people need, and it's interesting you say about the pep talk, and that people need to be extra reassured. And it's because of uncertain times. So really, really interesting. Thank you, Siobhan. Shaun,
people have transferred their like, they postponed their trip, and the times they postponed it to are now. And the reason they're getting disillusioned and almost heartbroken in some instances, like we've had clients crying on the phone, is because they're postponing it again.
Yeah. No, and that's understandable, because of course we go back to when everything happened. That was a few months ago now. People felt that perhaps now was the time when everything would have been gone by then, and unfortunately that is not the case. I think we need to learn how to live with this now, and we're all learning how to live with this, each and every one of us, suppliers, buyers and consumers. So it is an education process and a tall order for all of us. But thank you for sharing that, Siobhan. Shaun, which markets are showing to be more responsive than others to travel in Africa?
Yeah, I can really talk about Nomadic Africa and our experience. We're seeing a little interest with our luxury market, mostly from the United States. However, according to the government regulations, there are still some states that are still having to quarantine when traveling to Kenya, such as California, Florida, Texas. All other states so far are exempt from quarantine when traveling to Kenya. This is, however, changing on a day-to-day basis. So we're keeping up to date with that. Of course, people don't want to travel here if there's any reason for them to have to sit in a hotel room in Nairobi for 2 weeks and take up the space of their holiday. But otherwise, as Siobhan rushed on, we did expect there was a lot of interest to begin with, but now people are almost a little bit tired of the day-to-days and kind of political happenings in their own home countries. So there's at the moment there's little interest all around, to be honest. There's so much going on back home with people, but we're hoping there's people talking and still looking towards 2021, 2022.
And that's what actually came up last time. So I think that there is a common thread here, that people are actually banking on next year and the following, really. Right. So I think it gets postponed even further. Jeremy, now with the opening of various regions for international travel, what is the situation regarding travel insurance? What are the options for guests? What do they have as options?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so there aren't any absolute solutions at the moment. What we've seen in the industry, and the UK market is probably the centre of most things because of Lloyd's of London, is this general exclusion of anything COVID related. So that applies to cancellation cover, medical expenses, quarantine costs, etc. So most, certainly I'm talking about UK here, but I'm also talking about Kenya and Tanzania where our offices are based, have a general exclusion for COVID-19. So if you have a problem with contract COVID-19, you will not be insured, and that is scary for anybody traveling anywhere in the world, obviously in Kenya and Tanzania in particular for us. The second exclusion that is automatically imposed on most insurance policies that I've seen is a travel advisory exclusion. So in effect, the policy will say, travelling against the advice of a travel advisory, everything is excluded, full stop, there's no cover. So there are a lot of announcements recently, and I've seen policies from, I think, Trail Finders. I've seen one from a company called Hey Mondo. I think they may be Italian or Spanish. I think Virgin yesterday announced that they were anybody who booked a flight with Virgin, a ticket with them, would get COVID-19 cover. Well, that's great. And I thought, this is a breakthrough. If everybody does that on the airlines, then travel will become easier. So I looked at the Virgin website, and whilst I couldn't get hold of a policy, they do publish what's called their product information, which is a legal requirement in the UK. And there, halfway down the page, it says specifically any travel against a government's advisory null and voids the whole policy. So that's the problem that we're faced with. Everybody, I've heard from our clients in Kenya and Tanzania, that they are agents and operators in camps and lodges, that they are pestered with people desperate to come out there, and are being pestered with requests, can you get an insurance solution? There is not an easily available insurance solution. We as a company are working on one with the ministry in Kenya. We're working with one or two major insurers in Kenya as well, and we are hopeful we will get a solution within maybe a couple of weeks. The problem with the regions that we work in, the regulator has to sign off everything, and they are not the speediest organisations in the world, and so it's slow going. When we get a solution, we will be announcing it to the world, because it's what the travel industry needs. All well and good having a travel insurance policy, but if it excludes COVID, it's a problem. If it excludes travel against a travel advisory, there is no point having that insurance, and that is what is stopping people a lot of people that I speak to, from traveling abroad.
Yeah, and that is the problem. You need to really read the small print,
yeah,
because if a government then says, "I'm sorry, that we advise you against non-essential travel," then your insurance most likely doesn't cover it. So
correct.
The advice is actually be careful, read the small print, which in the past we would just say, oh great, I've got insurance, there's no problem. Now you have to. I'm just going to go back to Charlotte French, who's made a very good point, and I think everyone, I don't know if everyone's actually reading the chat, the Zoom group chat, but Charlotte's made a good point. She says, I think one of the reasons US clients aren't booking traveling much at all internationally at the moment is that we are seeing so many changes on a daily basis on entry, re-entry requirements. The fact that we have interstate quarantines is not helping, plus the ability of getting tests and results back within the timeline varies considerably based on your location. And that is just in support of what Siobhan was saying earlier. And I think Charlotte's very well, a very good point. In fact, Luke says confusion in the US and indeed worldwide around the requirements. There seemed to be a big break in period underway that will hopefully calm down with trial and error, hopefully not much of the latter. So it is all very good points. So keep your comments coming, because it's important to keep the interaction as well, and to share your thoughts as to how. But I hope that by sharing this knowledge with one another, that confusion can not be as much out in the industry. So I think talking to industry colleagues and friends will actually help. Thank you, Jeremy, for that. Definitely good tips.
There's another little issue as well, is that when we're booking recently, you have, legal requirements or statutory requirements, and, from the government, etc. But some DMCs in different African countries, and indeed some properties, are also putting in their requirements in order for clients to stay, which adds another layer of complexity for the client and for the advisor who's booking.
It does. It really does. Absolutely. It is something to watch out for. Katie, how strong is the domestic market in Africa? Because you know that it's been reported that the closure of borders has meant a loss of billions of dollars to the continent. But while other countries have looked internally for solutions, has this been an option for Africa?
Yeah, I mean, again, it varies from country to country, but slightly going back onto what Siobhan was saying in terms of the suppliers putting in terms and conditions, and then there's regulations to adhere to. There's now been enough time for a lot of the suppliers to look at that and actually say, right, the international market is not traveling. What are we going to do? Some people have sat back and said, actually, we just can't operate this year, which is just horrendous. Loss of jobs and everything else. But others really have flipped it on its head and really reached out to the local market. I mean, South Africa in particular, and we're talking on the luxury level here. I'm talking what everybody on this platform is selling. There has been a rejig in South Africa for a lot of luxury accommodations to be selling experiences to locals who to date might not have necessarily gone to those properties. So I would say traditionally, yes, there's always tourism market, but you look at somewhere like Botswana, which is heavily internationally focused on international market. Then you look at somewhere like Kenya, which actually does still have a very nice, strong domestic market. I mean, Shaun, I don't know if you can pitch in here in terms of seeing camps in the Mara, for instance. A lot of Kenyan locals might not have been able to get into camps in peak season before.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, most camps, actually, if not all camps, are priced in dollars. And these dollar rates are far too high for most Kenyans, your middle class and below. So it's been an opportunity for these camps to open up, just kind of cover their costs, keep their staff employed, and allow residents to experience the wonders of the migration. I was recently in the Mara filming, and I was quite happy to see the amount of local tourists visiting the Masai Mara for the first time. It's been a great opportunity locally, and also a great way for these camps to open and get used to these new COVID protocols before welcoming back tourists.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. I mean, getting the protocols right has been really key. And I think we're going to touch on it a little bit later, but being able to get guys in camp so they get used to the kind of setup before any clients arrive. But I also know, Luke, up at Vic Falls, again, on the Zambian side, obviously not on the Zim side, a lot of people are coming and booking up hotels. So in a way, yes, local market is strong, but it's by the luxury suppliers being a little bit more proactive, perhaps in either lowering rates a little bit or targeting new business and having those tourists who wouldn't necessarily, those locals come who wouldn't necessarily have been able to make it. So yes and no, but predominantly I'd say South Africa, the Falls, the Mara, because of the migration, but otherwise things are still relatively slow, particularly when you've got these kind of interstate movement problems, like in Namibia had been having quite a few inter-provincial lockdowns. So yeah, it varies from country to country, but there's a bit of light for some countries. But otherwise, a lot of countries have just completely stopped their tourism entirely.
Mm. And Shaun, you touched upon Kenya, Rwanda and Tanzania, but regarding Kenya, Rwanda and Tanzania have all been awarded the World Travel and Tourism Council safety stamp to recognize safe travel protocols. So what does this involve, and do you think this will boost traveler confidence?
Yeah, well, I mean, am I on? I'm off mute. Sorry. Yeah, this has been designed to enable travelers to identify destinations and businesses around the world which have adopted its health and hygiene standardized protocols. So I think this will definitely boost traveler confidence. This is a recognized international body which will give travelers confidence in wanting to book safaris to these destinations. The fact that travelers can still come out on safari and know in their mind that these properties and airlines are taking all the right measures to ensure infection rates are somewhat eliminated. For sure, I think this is a good thing. as I, brushed on before, I was recently in the Masai Mara, filming there, and I popped into a few of the properties. And although masks are a new normal and public areas being more open to allow social distancing, the experience is still the same. Once you're out on a drive, then naturally one is social distancing. There's been a big push since we last spoke back in June. First, the domestic market opened up, which has been a great way for these properties to kind of experience what post-COVID life would be like in these camps, and sticking to their new SOPs.
And I remember Julian last time actually saying, his clients were not very pleased with wearing masks doing safaris. So we did touch upon that last time. So good to know that there's been progress made.
There has been. And I mean, in camps, yes, you have to wear masks, and there's more tables are more spread out to enable social distancing. But once you're out on your game drives, most guides are wearing their masks. But as far as the clients are concerned in their vehicles, you can't be expected to wear a mask for the entire game drive, morning or evening. So it's still the same experience.
Yeah. There is a very healthy conversation happening at the same time. It's really good to see all these comments coming through. I'm not sure whether I should read them or just continue. I wanted to touch upon the client experience now, and I wanted to ask Luke, what kind of travelers are currently booking with Vayeni? Are you seeing more couples, families, travel bubbles booking?
Well, firstly, let me just say that we've been investing heavily whilst we've had this downtime in our operations into preparing what we believe will be a wave of corrected world travelers, coming to Africa post-COVID for a different type of luxury travel experience that not only focuses on the usual details and wildlife tick boxes, but immersion and obviously transformational opportunities that allow them to give back. So to this end, we recently launched something called In Search of the Great Seven, which brings these nouveau travelers in contact with a soulful and life-changing journey that caters for their every need, shepherded by the finest wildlife personalities. But it also offers them an opportunity to give back significantly to the continent that is currently leading the way in wildlife conservation, with 7 out of the top 10 countries in the world, which is quite incredible when you think about it. And that's recently been published in an Oxford University study. And I mean, I didn't actually know that myself, but and 4 out of those top 5 are right here in Southern Africa. So really exciting. But getting back to the question, for the short term, in the last few months and for the remainder of 2020, we have been receiving bookings from adventurous travelers that have visited Africa before and are desperate to come back. Unfortunately, we've had to postpone some of those just simply because they couldn't travel to some of the destinations that they wanted to. And then in the medium to long term, we've been getting solo travelers and couples who are young adults, flexible with their travel plans, and at a low risk from catching any kind of disease. And going forward into 2022, we are starting to see the family travelers and multi-generational bookings come back that were booming pre this period. Southern Africa travel bubbles are not confidently in place as yet, and so we haven't seen much on that side, but confident that with a coordinated approach from the region's governments that we will start having some of these borders open and we can create these bridges.
So not to dislike what Siobhan said at the beginning about her clients in the US wanting to book and, still slowing. I think you guys are pretty much saying the same thing, Siobhan, do you think? Do you see similarities between what Luke is finding and what you see in your area when people come to book Africa? Is that more or less? Oh, you're muted. I think you need to mute. Sorry, I do ask everyone to unmute and then.
Yeah, no. I mute because I wear bandies
That's
when
good.
they make noise. We sent out a newsletter, and it was, I think, if I remember correctly, the newsletter was on Rwanda and Kenya. And it was interesting because we got requests coming back for clients for, I'm always very bad at pronouncing Portuguese names, for Sao Tome and Principe, Tome and Principe. And it was interesting because the inquiry came in, and we also had another one for the Congo. And the day before, I had just seen a webinar with Classic Portfolio, and they were mentioning about West Africa. So the one thing we did see, and the one thing we knew from research, was that people were looking for off the beaten track experiences. And we always felt that Africa represented an off the beaten track destination. However, we find even within that, people are looking for places in Tanzania like Ruaha and not Serengeti. You know, they're talking more about Laikipia, Lewa, where Shaun's based, etc., like other places apart from the norm, because they are concerned that should they go to the Mara or somewhere that, you know, they will see more people. So I think people are looking at the same destinations, but in a different way, and then looking at areas in Africa that people are not already going to. Like we really want, like I had my goal last November, December, because I met a few wonderful properties like Matetse, etc. in Zimbabwe, and I really wanted to push Zimbabwe. And then COVID happened, and they're not opened as of yet, but they will shortly, hopefully. But like that's a new destination for us that we don't normally push. And we know it represents amazingly good value, and it's, you know, a fraction of the price of other high-end safaris, which would open up the safari world to newer clients, like younger couples, etc. So for us, we find that COVID has made people have more lateral thinking. And again, that what happened after 9/11 is that the 3-generation inquiries are coming in, and also that bucket list inquiry. So there is a big change.
Yeah, so Africa remains the bucket list for those who are really into it, but then perhaps don't visit the same places, but will actually look laterally at other. And it makes a lot of sense now that you say that, because I've recently visited Italy and visited my mum, and we actually, you know, Italy was a choice, and obviously it's a place we wanted to go, but rather than going on the usual places, we avoided the hubs of there might be a bit too many tourists there, so why let's not go somewhere that it's not a usual place to go. So it just does make a lot of sense.
Or the iconic places, because as like we had a conversation yesterday, and like you can book Giraffe Manor now, and they've got availability. It's great. So, you know, maybe if people were planning those trips and they couldn't get availability before, now's the time.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you. Thank you. Shaun, how have you adapted your product offering to help clients feel that Africa is still an option for them, particularly when it comes to booking flexibility?
Yeah, so we've adapted offerings based, you know, on the properties involved in the itineraries. Most camps and lodges are offering more flexible cancellation policies. However, there are still some penalties in place for last-minute cancellations. These properties, they do have to have that in place. After all, they are a business. But what we have been pushing for is assured supplier lists, of which our preferred properties are offering flexible booking terms to us, and then in turn to the clients. You know, examples of these are fully refunded deposits if cancelled before 60 days, whereas before some properties used to be 90 or 120 days out. Some properties, there was a non-refundable deposit. So there's a lot more flexibility in that way. And also final payments can be made at as little as 60 days out. Before this was 90 days or even longer for some properties. So we've had to, so we've had to, as I said before, look at postponed and cancelled bookings on a case-by-case basis, depending on the itinerary and the different properties involved.
Yeah, cancellation is an interesting one. I think every single supplier had to adapt their policies to work with a lot shorter lead times than before. because of this situation. So again, another very interesting dimension. Katie, one of the key concerns from agents was knowing how protocols will impact their experience. So for example, if you need to wear a mask on a game drive, and we touched upon that last time, has there been, apart from what we've talked about just a moment ago, but has there been any further news on government in terms of balancing health and safety in safari experiences? Are there any tangible directives that you know of?
Well, the government's really been focusing on general hospitality. So it'd be looking at opening their restaurants and cafes and hotels in cities where there's a kind of a larger foot kind of fall. So when we're looking at our kind of safari side, all of those protocols have been taken into place, but then they're definitely hitting those protocols. So that's things like the distancing, like Shaun was saying, when you're at different tables. It is making sure that your waiting staff might have gloves on, and with turnarounds in terms of rooms, that type of thing. But I think the main thing in terms of experiences, the main change at the moment is going to be on how you travel. And those protocols have been very, very strict, and they're really impressive. When you look at all these places that have open borders and their domestic flights, the amount of clear identification of markings on floors in some pretty remote terminal buildings are all quite clear. You've got sanitizer everywhere, you've got masks having to be worn, you're getting tested once, twice, if not 3 times for your temperature before you're on a plane. There's one flight company that will take your temperature, and then if you have a temperature, they'll wait for half an hour in case you just got flustered or you've come from, your 39-degree heat or something, I don't know. So then you can, just make absolutely sure. So I would say that is really where the protocols in terms of health and safety are going to be felt most. In terms of the luxury end, though, we have a lot more flexibility when you're using private planes, private villas, private guides, private camps, and on that side you're wrapped up in cotton wool, and your experience will be completely as you would have, well, not completely, because you've got to admit to certain, to the guidelines on flights and things, but in terms of the safari, it is there. There's a particular camp in Kenya, for instance, that when you've got a private vehicle, you can say to your guide whether you'd like him to wear a mask or not. So you kind of have the choice depending on how you feel. If you have your own person who comes and cleans your room, you can decide whether you'd want to be in the room, out the room. Should they be wearing a mask? Shouldn't they be wearing a mask? So again, it really is trying to be sensitive to the client's concerns whilst not making too much of a concern of it if they don't feel it's needed. So in terms of experiences, when you're talking about going on a safari, a drive or a walk, or a water-based safari, really the experience, it won't be that different. You have miles of fresh air, you're in the wilderness. If there's anywhere on this earth that you can go and be remote, the African continent can offer it in bucket loads. So I personally feel, and from what we've seen, it's going to be mainly on the travel, and it'll be on dining and in mess areas, rather than having to sit and wear a mask, as we say, on a vehicle.
And it makes sense, actually, because how can you even police it? When you're out in a game, and how can you police whether you're wearing a mask or not wearing a mask? I mean, I think it boils very much down to the individual company. And as Shaun said, when they're out, they're in the wild, and so
everybody wants to be irresponsible. And I think, over the last few months, we've been feeling our way in the dark. And, as Luke has been saying, he's been taking these opportunities to strengthen that conviction, so that when people do come, there's going to be levels of risk in terms of the type of client who's going to travel. Those people who travel first will be those who are less adverse to risk, just as nature goes. And so they will come with a certain mindset. Now, they might find that being offered hand sanitizer every 30 minutes is a little bit over the top, whereas, other people might feel, actually, that would be quite nice, and the opportunity is there to have that. And once the supplier, whichever camp it is, can actually understand what the client is needing to make them feel better, then they can implement it, as long as they have that flexibility and the opportunity there.
Well, we when you're having fun, time flies, isn't it? It's already 2:50, so we've been discussing this for 50 minutes. So I'm already 5 minutes late from my promise to open it up to questions. And there has been quite a healthy debate on the chat. The last one I'm seeing, it's from Marisa talking about hot topic of deposits and refunds and cancellation fees, and how can you charge when, you know, the borders are closed, etc. So I'm going to open it to every one of you to unmute yourself and launch yourself into a question that you may have to any of our distinguished panelists. Please don't be shy, because this is an opportunity to, and this is a perfect opportunity to actually kick off our social as well, because it'll be a good opportunity to just get involved. So if you want to put your cameras on, okay, not if it's 8 a.m. in the States and you've just woken up, I understand that. Maybe you don't want to put your camera on, but everyone else, please feel free to just unmute yourself and ask any questions you may have. I have a few more and I can continue going, but I think this is really your chance to ask questions. Does anyone want to ask? Don't be shy. No? Oh, everyone, we've got a shy group today. I can't believe that.
Can anybody clarify, and this is sort of like one of these, again.
Hello, Julian.
And hello. Again, this is, can anybody clarify whether or not clients need to wear masks while guerrilla trekking in Rwanda? I understand, like in the Congo, like I've been to Congo, and we had to wear them when we actually were with the guerrillas, but not when we were like hiking through the jungle by ourselves. And there's been some lack of clarity on that, because it's hard enough to hike at altitude when you're not from a high altitude country, and then to wear a mask while you're doing it is asking a lot. And I think, like, before I would recommend someone go, I'd want the answer to that question.
Julian, I've been in touch with Volcanoes a bit about this, and if I were you, it's probably something that's worth chatting to the individual suppliers, but generally it is only when you are with the actual guerrillas, and then social distancing is kept on the walk. Before
okay, so that would be fine. That's just like, that's like Congo Brazzaville. But I had heard I've been attending the OurAfrica.travel, and I heard from a supplier there that they might have to wear them while they're actually trekking. And I just think that would be really difficult, you know, to do.
I think there might have been a confusion there. I think you're okay to trek up into a certain distance with your guys, and it's still groups of 8, from what I understand, that you're allowed to go in. Shaun, you're nodding. Have you been doing any of this?
I've spoken to some residents in Kigali who have had the opportunity to go and see the guerrillas at a reduced rate, and they had to wear masks while they're with the guerrillas, but they didn't have to wear them while they were hiking. I don't think anyone can expect you to wear a mask hiking in those conditions in a hot jungle. I think it would be
okay.
I would concur with that, because that's what we were told as well. Not what you're told.
Okay, great.
Okay. Any more questions?
Micaela, a lot of people are talking about, you know, philanthropic and sustainable travel, but I think this will again move the notch up to more conscientious traveling going forward. And I'd love to know what everyone else thinks about that, like that people will be not necessarily seek out sustainable travel per se with a tag on it, but be more conscientious in their activities and what they look for. And I'd love to know what maybe the suppliers who are looking at it or the other panelists think.
Siobhan, it's interesting you say that. There's a fantastic new foundation that's just started up called the Conscientious Travel Foundation to address just that demand. And that's actually been set up by a number of tour operators who are UK based. But I think they only started about 2 months ago, because it's definitely a pattern of what people are looking for at the moment, because there's so much change and there's so many variable impacts. I mean, dare I say it, because there's no answer, but the amount of plastic that's now being used again with travel is
really bad. What was accomplished, and it's back there again.
Yeah, Yeah, but you have one problem, you then start weighting them, don't you, as to what you need to address at the time. So, and I think I think you're right, the Conscientious Travel Foundations and all these other companies who are looking at conscientious travel are correct. I think they're quite inextricably, I think they're pretty linked. And those people who are offering sustainable travel, both in terms of a supplier, but also in terms of experiences, you know, it doesn't have to be a supplier, just going somewhere. They're pretty extensive now. They're pretty good. There's a lot. I mean, a lot of Africa it's born with sustainability in mind.
And it's like going to those more unusual parks that are off the beaten track, you know, and doing things there. But the other thing as well is I think people think it's one or the other, that it's very black and white, either sustainable travel or it's not. And I think conscientious traveler is allowing the person who, you know, doesn't want to commit themselves to doing everything in a sustainable manner, but doing as much as they can in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think that actually links, I was a bit nervous about bringing this up, but it does link with this idea of deposits and cancellations and payments on this, because there are certain camps that simply cannot open unless you have an indication of there's going to be some form of deposit that is paid. Just simply to open, to have its footsteps there. So when you're looking at terms and conditions, and it is a nightmare, it really is, but when you're looking at terms and conditions, you've got to be careful that you're not comparing something like, you mentioned Giraffe Manor, to something like, I don't know, something up in northern Kenya, Krisia Walking Trails or something, in terms of the cost of getting these things up and running. So that's something that we all really do need to be aware of. And I think initially when this pandemic hit, everybody quite rightly and understandably had to look at looking after their own clients, looking after their own businesses, and looking at their immediate area. And I think as the months have gone on, there's a huge amount of understanding in this industry. You know, the Africa travel world is fantastic. It's made up of friends as well as business partners. And people are coming together to try and understand each other's positions. And that is understanding people's government restrictions, which varies, understanding people's ability of payment in terms of where deposits have to sit, and understanding the supplier. Where are you going to? How is it being able to be opened? Who are you paying and why? What conservation fees are having to be paid? What permits are being paid? You know, everybody understands that in Rwanda, gorilla permits have to be paid and they are non-refundable. You know, but I think it's just, it's a much bigger kind of question, but it does link in quite nicely to that Conscientious Travel Foundation, because it's understanding who you're booking and why.
Yeah. And I think when you do series, you want to book, like you do want to book iconic properties and bigger operations, but you love to marry that up with small one-man bands and one-woman bands, and you know, sort of something that's very unique and very localized within a region. So it's lovely if there is a foundation that, you know, assists you with that.
They're on Instagram.
I mean, I think like in principle, like, you know, we like to support the small boutique owner-run properties, but some clients have asked, is that place actually going to be open if I book for 9 months from today, if I book for a year from today? Whereas I know if I book One and Only or Singita, they're going to be there. Whereas if I book the small owner run place, there's a chance it might not be there, and then my money doesn't, just sort of disappears. So I think that's one thing that, you know, I think does need to be, it's sort of like the elephant in the room. We don't, you know, realistically, there are places that are not going to survive. And, you know, we need to be able to get a gauge of which ones are likely to survive, because we have a duty of care to our clients not to book them into a place that probably won't be there, you know, by the time they travel. And I don't know how to do that other than, I mean, there's certain companies we worked with for a long time that, you know, I feel like I can have a conversation with them and gauge it. But there are others that maybe we don't work with as often, and I'd like to be able to support them. But on the other hand, I also cannot, in good conscience, you know, book clients into a place that I'm not sure is going to be there by the time they travel. So, I mean, I don't know if anyone, I don't think that's a question that has an easy answer, but I'm wondering if anyone maybe from the product side could address that, or maybe from the insurance side even, like, you know, what happens if we book a client into a place that then goes belly up and then the deposit disappears, and then, you know, particularly in the UK, I think we would probably be stuck holding the bag, and we can't afford that. So, like, you know, just wondering, you know, does anybody have any insight in that area? Otherwise, the rational thing to do is to play it safe and stick with the big names, even though that's not necessarily what we would otherwise do.
Yeah, thank you, Julian. This is an interesting point. Or maybe, Jeremy, have you got views on that? You're on mute, by the way.
Yeah, I realise that. Well, I have views, but whether they're of any help or not is another matter. So my understanding of the UK travel industry, and I'm sure lots of people out there know a lot more than me, is that a lot of holidays are bonded, whether it's Atta, IATA, Atoll. And so my understanding is if a trip is cancelled as a result of failure, particularly of the airlines, there is compensation payable anyway. 2 years ago, I was asked to, and I spoke to Kato and Tato, who are the Association of Travel Tour Operators in Tanzania and Kenya, to come up with a bond scheme whereby there were guarantees in place that if there was a failure of any of the organisations that Julian's talking about, that the customer will get a full refund from the Kato and Tato organisations. Unfortunately, it didn't proceed because, unfortunately, no insurance company would actually underwrite the risk because it was deemed to be too risky. Not because at the time, obviously COVID-19 wasn't around at that time, just the lack of confidence in our case, Kenyan shilling or the Tanzanian shilling, and the lack of knowledge of, which we have in the UK, of credit risks, which is quite easily to look into in the UK, but not so much in Kenya and Tanzania. So it would be nice to have an insurance solution which we could offer to everybody, every member of Kato, Tato, Atta, or whoever it will be. But it's a long way from being done until the world has confidence in the Kenyan and Tanzania in particular economy. So no solution at the moment, unfortunately.
And again, very fluid, but a very good point. Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you very much for Julian for raising this point. So it is now 3 o'clock. So I wanted to just thank our panelists for their contribution, Katie, Siobhan, Luke, Shaun, and Jeremy, for your invaluable knowledge, time, and views today, and for giving us all so much insight. And personally, I found this really, really interesting. I found a lot of, and I'm sure many people would have found the same. And thank you everyone for being here and listening and contributing. We have recorded this session, so this will be available as soon as possible. Right after this, so right now, we will be hosting a social, and Gemma will be taking the hosting for that. So for those of you who want to continue this conversation, please feel free to stay on this call. Very briefly before I pass on to Gemma, as a quick reminder, next month we will be hosting our second edition of Connections Virtual Week, following 98% satisfaction rate in July from our buyers and suppliers. So this will be taking place on Monday the 28th of September for the week until Friday the 2nd of October. So just as before, you will have the power to dictate who you meet, when you meet, how many meetings you have. So you're in the driving seat. Plus we have many exciting group experiences from Tokyo, Japan, Italy, Malta, Portugal, and California. So if you're yet to register, please give us a call or email us, and we're here to help. And that's not all. On Wednesday, the 28th of October, we will be hosting also a very special buyer-only event in partnership with Oman. So for any buyers on this call that would like a deep dive into luxury travel in Oman, do let us know and we will sign you up for that. Yeah, and finally, if anyone who's new to Connections, please get in touch if you're interested in joining us. So now we've got the social networking session. You're not obliged to stay. If you have to go, please feel free to go. If not, we will continue a little social, which will be far more informal. We will stop recording, by the way, so nothing will be recorded. It's a social session. We will assign you to breakout rooms to make it more intimate, to 5-6 people each.